Thank you. Thank you very much. So Chelsea's parents couldn't get a sitter, so they're here tonight.
We're pretty responsible.
Well, yeah, I don't think your mic's working.
We're pretty responsible, so we'll take care of them.
Yes, we will keep an eye on them, yeah, for sure. Well, should we bring them out? Let's bring them out. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Secretary and President Clinton. There they are. Well, I am honored to be here with the three of you tonight. Very friendly with Chelsea and a great admirer of all of yours. And I do want to mention something because I think this is probably the case for most of the people here tonight. When we see you, I think we see a super family, a family of people that came from a place none of us know. And I wonder how, I mean, because I know, you're people and you had families and parents and grew up in humble beginnings and all of those things. How did this happen? How did you become the Clinton family?
Well, I was an impoverished law student who had 6 jobs working myself through law school. And I was in this class one day that I infrequently attended. And I saw this interesting looking woman. And I followed her out of class. And I reached out to touch her on the shoulder, as close as I am to you, and I said, "No, I better not do this." So help me God, I didn't do it. A couple weeks later, I was staring at her in the library. She put the book down and walked all the way across the library and said, "If you're going to keep staring at me and I'm going to keep staring back, we should at least know each other's name. I'm Hillary Rodham. Who are you?" And, you know, I was in 1971, 100 years ago, and I instantaneously became a women's rights advocate in that magic moment. That's how it all happened, really.
Now, Jimmy, you want to hear the real version?
Sure.
That's how it happened.
Well, no, that is an accurate part of the story. But the first time I ever had any awareness of Bill was I was with some friends in the student lounge where we used to have vending machines, basically, at the law school. And I hear this voice saying, "And not only that, we grow the biggest watermelons in the world." And I turned to my friends, I said, "Who is that?" And they said, "That's Bill Clinton. He's from Arkansas, and that's all he ever talks about."
And I think it's clear, obviously, where I came from. And so I'm just incredibly grateful to watermelons and vending machines in the Yale Law Library. But growing up in my house, the first thing I learned to read was the newspaper. And some of my earliest memories are having debates with my parents. Being 4, 5, 6 years old and talking about whatever we'd read in the newspaper that day. And that my parents didn't only hope that I might have an opinion and hope that I could defend that opinion, but they expected me to have an opinion, and they expected me to be able to defend that opinion. And I think that that set of expectations clearly had a huge impact on my growing up and being able to be proud to be their daughter.
In my house, we read the comics and we're told to keep our opinions to ourselves.
Well, that didn't work very well.
No, it didn't. You should know that.
Look, we just met his parents backstage. They're, as you might imagine, moderately proud of their little boy here. What I think about this, no one ever really knows how anybody else's life, they don't even know how their own lives work out. But if you show up and do something you believe in, something good will happen. I think that's really the, people say, when I ran for president, every third person I ever met in my whole life said, you know, he told me he was going to run for president. It's not true. I knew he was going to do that. Wasn't true. But what is true is if you really care about things and you just show up every day and you throw yourself into something you care about, something good will happen. And even if you try to do something and you fail, you'll wind up in a very different and better place than if you hadn't tried. That's really the only lesson of this. You just sort of make it up as you go along, and if you get a few breaks, it works out this way, and if you get a few bad breaks, it works out that way, but you're always going to be way ahead of where you would be if you don't try.
Hence, one of our family mottos is, it's always better to get caught trying.
It's always better what?
It's always better to get caught trying.
To get caught trying. Okay.
But I mean, but you're, you know, the little bit I know about your career is exactly like that. Just keep going and going and going, and all of a sudden, you get some break, some opportunity, which didn't happen overnight. You worked hard to earn it, then something else. And I think there's an important, you know, lesson from all of that. Too many people think somehow if they don't get what they've worked for right away, that either they have failed, or it wasn't meant to be, or, you know, they give up because they can't bear the energy and the disappointment of going on, when in fact, that's often the best time for what you can learn about yourself and what you're capable of doing. And, you know, certainly, you know, Bill, first time he ran for office, he lost. And it was, you know.
Even in school, I lost weight.
No, but and he could have very well drawn a different conclusion. Instead, he thought, okay, what did I do wrong? What do I need to do more? I mean, I never thought I would run for office, but when I started to, I was elected to the Senate.
You won.
Twice. I did.
Yeah. See that? She won right off the... Yeah.
But then...
It's called rubbing it in.
But then I had a big loss, which we all remember. And you just have to... You just have to decide what you really care about. And, you know, for Bill and me, meeting in law school, we both, probably because we were of that generation, we both really believed in trying to make a contribution, not necessarily running for office, but doing something in the public arena.
Can I ask about before college, before law school? I read a story about you, Secretary, when you were 13 years old. You used the phone at school to call Mayor Daley's office in Chicago. At the time, you were a Republican, to complain about some sort of voting irregularities that favored the Kennedy campaign. I find that amazing because, I mean, I don't know any 13-year-old, well, I don't know any 13-year-old kids, to be honest with you, but I don't know any 13-year-old kids that even look up from their video games. And do you believe that activist spirit is something that you were born with?
No, I think it was because of my parents. You know, both of my parents were very much of the opinion that you had to work hard. And my late father used to say, when you work, work hard. When you play, play hard. And don't confuse the two. And they were deeply interested in what went on in our community, in our state, in our country. Also, my school teachers. I mean, part of the reason, well, first of all, we didn't have video games. There really wasn't a lot to do. So we had to make up our fun. And so our social studies teacher came in and was just outraged because he had some bad experience when he went to vote in Chicago, and he got all of us all worked up. So there was about 10 of us around the payphone outside the cafeteria making this phone call. I was the one on the phone. But it was, in part, it was a very activist time. You know, and I think the activism of today's young people, we've been talking about this, is equally participatory, but there are so many different and other ways of participating that young people today have available to them in large measure because technology has so empowered people. So, I was somebody who was encouraged to speak out and speak up and, you know, take opinions just like we passed on to our daughter. But I think that's just a different way of expressing yourself. And there were a lot of kids that I went to school with who expressed it through the arts, or they expressed it, you know, because they were interested in science or whatever. And it's just find something you care deeply about, that you're excited about, and be active. That was the basic lesson.
President Clinton, you became politically active at what age?
I remember my uncle ran for the state legislature, and I passed out cards for him when I think I was 8 years old.
You were part of Boys State when you were in high school. Famous story, you met John F. Kennedy, who your wife was busy trying to thwart by calling the mayor in Chicago.
I love Mayor Daley. He was a creative accounting major when it came to counting those votes for John Kennedy in Illinois in 1960.
And so when you again we talked about this spirit that I do believe is a talent, not unlike people who are great singers or musicians, and you pass this on to your daughter. Most young people, I think, identify with the party that their parents identify with, the party that their parents support. Do you think it is important to challenge your parents' beliefs? And if so, what would you have said to Chelsea if she told you she was a Republican?
That it had been nice knowing her.
Now look, that's a joke. Let me say this. My grandfather had a big impact on me. My grandfather, we used to say when I was a kid that my grandfather thought he was going to Franklin Roosevelt when he died because of Roosevelt's profound influence on poor places like the place where I was born in the Depression. Then, you know, there were different issues, but they always expected me to have my own opinion. When Chelsea was 6, she mentioned this, I was running for re-election as governor. I had 2 main opponents. So for weeks on end, at breakfast, when we were all together, or at another meal, we would take turns being me or the 2 opponents. So once I was one of my opponents and Chelsea was me, and she just totally took me down, much better than I was doing in the campaign. It was so embarrassing to me that she was a better me than I was. And the point I'm trying to make is I think it's really important that people arrive at their own point of view. I remember once we were arguing about health care, and Chelsea had finished at Stanford and had gone to work and knew about these health savings accounts, which Hillary and I were viscerally against because we thought it was an excuse to avoid providing universal coverage. And Chelsea said, if you look at the way the business community is organized today, if you did these health savings accounts right and you gave enough preventive and primary care, you could actually make them very progressive and give people health care benefits they never had. And she had this big argument, and I decided she was right. So, you know, we didn't argue Republican and Democrat so much as we did, what's your position on this, that, or the other thing, and who knows the most and who can, you know, win. But we never had the kind of screaming matches we do now. We actually thought it mattered how good your argument was and whether you knew what you were talking about, which I think would be a very good thing in America and throughout the world if we did that.
Jimmy, I want to say a word about teachers, because on a serious note, I came from my father was a rock-ribbed, as we say, a rock-ribbed Republican, very much in that way of thinking, and I was too, because he was, at the point that you were making. And I had a wonderful teacher when I was a senior in high school, and she took me and one of my really good friends who came from a very Democratic family, and she assigned each of us to debate on behalf of the other. It's sort of like what Bill was talking about, what we did with Chelsea. So I had to immerse myself in Lyndon Johnson and what he was saying, what his policies were, and my friend had to do the same at that time with Barry Goldwater. That was such an eye-opener, and she knew it would be. The teacher knew it, and she made us do it. And it began to really cause me to question, and so then eventually, within a few years, you know, I began to be more independent and then ended up in the Democratic Party.
And I think, you know, to bridge off of what both my parents just said, they were more supportive than I think kind of my mother's glib reaction may have implied when I had different opinions. For a long time, for example, as we've talked about publicly, I had a different opinion about equal marriage rights and gay rights. And my parents were always profoundly supportive of me carving out my own opinion and my own position, provided that I could defend it, and that defense was based kind of in whatever my ethics were, as well as in whatever the evidence was. But for what my mom said, one of the challenges that I confront when I'm kind of riding on the subway or walking down the street or in an airport is that people come up to me, because I don't quite travel in the same level of protection that my parents do, and say things to me like, now that the president has come out in support of equal marriage rights, why don't we have, gay marriage legal in every state? And when I hear things like that, I realize that one of the challenges that we have here in the United States, but I think this is true around the world, is that people no longer understand what level of government is responsible for what. And so my mom knew, that if she was upset about voting irregularities, in Illinois at least, she should call the mayor's office. And I don't think now people really understand at the level that we all should have a vested interest in young people understanding, what should we ask and then hold our mayors accountable for? What should we ask and then hold our governors accountable for? What should we ask and then hold the government in Washington accountable for? And that's something I hope that for those of you who are interested in education, you'll really focus on, so that we can get civics back into the classroom, and that so more young people can have more teachers like my mom had.
The other thing I would like to say that I believe is within the experience of most of the people here. I was very influenced by a book I read a couple of years ago, because I agreed with it, but I hadn't thought about it. And the way this book was called The Big Sort, S-O-R-T, by a journalist who happened to be a Democrat named Bill Bishop from Austin, Texas, who had a very close friend in his neighborhood who was a Republican. And they went walking every day. Their children played together. They had debates. They learned things. But he said, I was the only guy in our neighborhood who was really nice to him, so he left our neighborhood where John Kerry beat George W. Bush 3-1, and he moved to another neighborhood where George W. Bush beat John Kerry 4-1, and both neighborhoods were poorer. And I say that because this guy's whole book offers reams of data in the United States to make the following point. We are getting rid of all of our prejudices. We're not as racist, as sexist, as homophobic as we used to be. We have one remaining bigotry. We do not want to be around anybody who disagrees with us. And you laugh about it, but even in the social media, we'd gravitate to people who give us an attaboy, who say, sort of reinforce what we're doing. And I personally think that's not a good thing. I think that if you believe that that intelligence is evenly distributed, and that people are basically good, and that what we have in common is more important than our differences, then we all need just a little time to be with people we disagree with. Hillary's mother, who was wonderful into her 90s, she lived into her 90s, her husband was a Republican, she was a liberal Democrat. She forced herself to watch Fox News, just to force herself well into her 90s to keep honing her debate skills, and to make sure she was acting out of conviction, and she knew what other people believed, and this is why she believed what she did. It's one thing I think you should remember. If you get into groupthink, it gets you in real trouble. You get stale, and we all know what terrible, calamitous consequences it has in many countries around the world, where people finally believe only people who agree with them, or the children of God even. So I ask you to keep that in mind.
So you hear that, kids? The president is telling you to watch Fox News.
Sparingly.
Keep
your hand in.
Some presidents will take it easy after leaving office. What motivates you to continue working so hard? Why aren't you painting kittens right now?
Because he doesn't really know how to paint.
I love this. I mean, I think I should spend the rest of my life trying to give other people the same set of life chances that I had. It bothers me that it's true that we had a lot of, I was born at the end of World War II when the per capita income of my native state was barely half the national average, and I was the first person in my family ever to go to college. It's also true that there was more social mobility then, that is, you had a better chance of working yourself from poverty into the middle class than is the case now. And I'm worried that all over the world, things are too stratified. Even with all the formula-breaking potential of the internet, for example, and the ability to form NGOs and all that. The reason we support all these things is because, at least for me, is I think that I should spend the rest of my life trying to create a world of greater shared opportunity and shared prosperity and shared responsibilities where other people can live their dreams the way I got to. That's really why I do it. It's a lot of fun for me. And I've been out of the game too long to make a living as a jazz musician anymore. I'll never be a good enough golfer to do that. And I'm too much of a Calvinist. I'd be riddled with guilt if I stayed home all the time. So I'm doing what makes me happy. This is a lot of fun. Wouldn't you rather be with you than sitting home or on some golf course swinging at a ball somewhere? I have a good time with you.
The students in this room, I'm sure feel a lot of pressure to make something of themselves, to do something important. But when your father is the president and your mother is Secretary of State, you can't work at Walgreens. I mean, you can't.
Although I know that if that's what I would have wanted to do, my parents would have supported me. And I really do mean that. I mean, one of the things that I'm acutely aware of is my husband and I think about and dream of starting our own family is how lucky I am to have my parents. And not only because they are tremendous role models, but because I never doubted that I was the center of their lives. So, for example, when my father ran for president in '92, back when campaigns were only 13 months instead of now 3.5 years, as they seem to be, at least in America, over those 13 months, there were only 3 nights when I wasn't with one or both of my parents. And I didn't miss any school except to go to the debates. So that meant that my parents, while they were out campaigning across the country, talking about sort of their vision for the future of our country, they made a Herculean effort to come home and be with me so we could have dinner together, they could help me with my homework. And that just underscored that it wasn't just the quality of time, but it was the quantity of time that they were investing in me. And I find that without that base, I couldn't imagine anything in my life kind of from that moment forward, because my parents were always so supportive and encouraging, but also really tough. I mean, to ensure that I was being honest with myself about what I wanted to do, where my talents were, where my talents weren't, and how to match, oh yes, definitely that too, and how to match my aspirations with my talents so that hopefully I could have a life that would be as productive and fulfilling as the ones that they've chosen for themselves. And part of that then realization for me was ultimately the metric of success that I cared about in my life was the metric of success that they had cared about their entire lives. How many lives were impacted, improved, enhanced by the work that they had done. It's sort of frustrating as a kid to realize you care about the same things your parents care about. I tried really hard to care about other things. I spent 7 years working in the private sector. I worked on Wall Street. I tried really hard to care about things like money as a denominating metric of success in life, and I just didn't. And thankfully, after sort of beating my head against that wall, I realized there was nothing more that I would rather do than ensure that I was making the maximum difference that I could do with all of my energies and talents. And now I'm thrilled that we all get to work together at the Clinton Foundation.
And it's nice to be able to spend time with each other at work. Do you get to be alone, the 3 of you together?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we, and now, of course, with Chelsea's husband, Mark, it's the four of us a lot of the times, but that's what I look forward to more than anything. I mean, you know, Bill and I have spent many years, you know, being in public, and I'm very grateful for the opportunities that that's given us to, you know, pursue ideas and projects and interests that we thought were important. But there isn't anything more important than your family. I mean, constantly I'm asked, well, you know, you've been this, you've been that, you've been this, and they say, well, what was the most important thing you ever did? And I've always said the same thing, and that is being Chelsea's mother, because I think there isn't any more important job than the next generation and the commitment that you should have if you do bring children into the world, to doing everything you can to help them live up to their God-given potential, whatever that is. So it's something we try to make time for. We set it on our schedules, and you know, it's planned, but it's also spontaneous.
I can't imagine the three of you doing anything frivolous. Are there times where you will...
Boy, have we fooled you.
Yeah, I really can. I can't imagine you guys like watching The Real Housewives or something.
Oh, God.
My mother loves home decorating shows. Like, no tomorrow.
Antiques Roadshow, we love that.
We love Antiques Roadshow. We play lots of games.
Even that's on PBS.
We do jigsaw puzzles. We
play
do
lots
a
of
lot
cards.
of really silly, lots of card games, serious.
We might be a little competitive. You're probably not surprised by that.
Who usually
long
wins
walks.
those card
And
games?
Chelsea and my son-in-law will watch a lot of Cheap Thrills movies with me. You know, Hillary thinks she's outgrown them, so I have to depend on my daughter to keep me awake so I can see them now. But yeah, we do a lot of silly things.
What's a recent crappy movie you guys watched together?
Oh, I don't. Well, Mark and I recently watched the 300 sequel, which I think qualifies, and was fantastic and fantastically awful at the same time. So I inherited that from my father, for which I'm really grateful, because I think it's important to have escapes in life, particularly when you're engaged in earnest, hard work most of the time. I think it's important to have humor. We watch a lot of late night television, so thank you.
Yeah, we depend on you for jokes, so you got to keep producing.
I'll try to start
Don't feel any
soon.
pressure or anything, but I mean, you know, it's really hard when you used to be in politics. Now, when I was in politics, I had a steady supply of people who would tell me all the latest jokes, and now you're it.
You're very
practically.
lonely.
Don't feel any pressure.
No, we talked about wasting time, and I think probably a lot of young people are very good at that, especially now. We have Facebook. So what would you say, and what can the people in this room say to their friends who would rather play Flappy Bird or sit around and watch television? Because I feel like, I know this is a select group of very smart people, but it seems to me like it's hard to get anyone to care about anything now.
I don't think that's necessarily true.
Yeah, it is. It's
no,
true.
I don't think so, Jimmy.
You should see these people.
I think this whole auditorium
Look at them.
contradicts
These kids
that.
have sport coats. They're different.
No, but you know, seriously, one of the things that I think is unfair to the generation represented here, my daughter, I guess, was at the very beginning of it, the so-called millennial generation, is that they are actually more active in participating in all kinds of activities. And
But giving something a like on Facebook is not really participating.
No,
But
more
we are the generation that has volunteered the most in American history, even more than my parents' generation, on a per capita basis. And I think, you know, one of the things that my mom talked about earlier, which is something that we spend a lot of time thinking about as a family and at the Clinton Foundation, is that there are so many different ways to participate now. There are more outlets and more options. Participation is more democratized now here in the United States and around the world than it's ever been before. And so I think we don't yet have real metrics to how best to assess how we are collectively participating, because we can no longer just look at volunteering, and we no longer can just look at showing up at the ballot box, because people are signing petitions online, organizing online, showing up offline through having organized on Twitter or Facebook, kind of giving money online like we saw through the CGI U commitments bracket. And so I think we don't yet quite know how to fully quantify really how much this generation is participating, are raising our hands, raising our voices, and already engaging and making a difference.
Let me just give you an example. In the United States, there are more than 1 million non-governmental organizations, that is, private organizations committed to doing some public good. More than half of them have been organized in the last 18 years. So in your lifetime, there's just been this explosion of people like you who, yeah, they have fun on Facebook or Twitter or whatever, but it's also an organizing tool to try to do something good to make a real difference in life. When I was in college, most people, I belonged to the one group that did volunteer work in the urban DC area, but most of us thought of doing public good as just working in elections, or trying to pass some bill in Congress or something. And now, what's our whole deal here is about, there are things, whether you live in the United States or anywhere else in the world, where you can make a difference. That young woman who was on the stage with me last night from Saudi Arabia talking about driving a car, then putting it on Facebook, then driving the message home and getting more allies and doing things. That sort of thing is sweeping the world today. So these young people, look, I want you to take time off. You should have fun. That's not, nobody can work all the time, but these people are making a difference far more than any previous generation, and on every continent and at every income level in ways that no one had imagined before. That's the great gift that technology has given us, and collective awareness.
What will be the issues that these students, when they are your age, what will be the primary issues that they face in 40 years?
Well, they're facing it right now, and thankfully, again, this generation is much more committed to doing something on climate change. And if we could just figure out how to transform that commitment to doing something about trying to deal with the effects of climate change, trying to help people who are being ravaged by not only weather patterns, but drought and so much else, if we could figure out how to turn that into a political force, because what we're finding is this generation understands better than the ones that have gone before, including ours, that this is not just some ancillary issue. This will determine, in large measure, the quality of life in so many places around the world. So I'm hoping that there will be this mass movement that demands political change, that makes what public officials do on dealing with carbon emissions, dealing with the other greenhouse gas emissions, dealing with the effects of it, a voting issue. And it becomes just as powerful as some of the other issues that affect the outcome of elections here and around the world.
And I would say that it has to be coordinated across countries, because we do need a global response to this urgent global challenge. And if I think about the campaign in the late 70s and the early 80s against nuclear weapons, which really did become a global mission from Japan to the United States, across swaths of Asia and Europe in between, that was organized before the advent of the World Wide Web. I mean, we just celebrated the World Wide Web's 25th anniversary. And so surely, if a mass campaign that enfranchised young people predominantly and voters across so many countries could be organized before the internet and the mobile revolution, surely we can do this collectively now.
I also think there'll be problems with local resources. I think the air quality problems in China are just the fire bell in the night. It's just the beginning. There's going to be massive sections of the world that are going to be facing protein shortage if we keep drying up our fishing stocks, which is why I'm glad we have some proposals in that area here. I think that we're going to have a continuing problem with, as we go into the Internet of Things, it's going to put productivity increases at a blinding speed so that the marginal cost of producing things will go down, down, down. But that will make it even harder, unless we're very creative, to keep people your age employed. We already have, where there have been problems, like in Greece, the youth unemployment rate's been just under 60%. In Spain, it's been about 50%. And in the United States, the long-term unemployment rate is appalling in a country where the whole culture favors work. And I think probably, even when you're my age, there'll be a continuing debate about how to reap the benefits of increasing technological productivity and still give people something meaningful to do that will generate an income for them every day. I think that's going to be very important. I hope by the time you're my age, we will not have the identity conflicts we have today. If you think about the Russia, Ukraine, Europe problem, if you think about the people who are worried about what's going to happen in Syria because they're afraid if Assad goes, that the good news is the dictatorship will be gone. The bad news may be, will all the various little groups in Syria, as along with the larger groups, be protected and have the ability to pursue their faith, their families, their work. These kind of identity conflicts that are sweeping the world, I hope to God you will not face them, but you're going to have to work right now as hard as you can wherever you live to minimize them, because they're all being driven by people who are afraid that unless they have some group they can dominate, there won't be enough for them, either enough wealth or enough sway over their own livelihoods. Those are the things that I think are most likely to dominate the world for the next 40 or 50 years.
What do you say to people who say we should focus on our problems and help people who need help at home before we help people in other countries?
I agree with that. I think that we do have to help people at home. I think that's true for any country. But I think that part of the way we help people at home is by helping other people. And there are three quick examples about that. I mean, we have to make sure that we have a good system, a good health surveillance system around the world, because diseases cross borders. So our investments in global health, our support for global health organizations is not just about helping somebody on another continent, it's also about helping people here at home to make sure that, you know, we try to control the cross-border threats from disease. Climate change, we just mentioned. You know, if we are serious about trying to help ourselves, that's an issue that we're going to have to deal with elsewhere. And the point that Bill was making, we need more economic activity around the world. We need to have a stable global economy that comes from working with other countries, having fair rules governing the economic activities of the world, because that's good for us and it's good for others. So when people say we should be helping our own, I agree 100%. But in today's world, helping our own doesn't mean trying to build walls around the United States and keep immigrants out and do more things that are unfortunately not workable and oftentimes just thrown out for political purposes, but also not in our interests. So this is the right question to ask, and I think the first answer has to be our first responsibility is always to ourselves, our neighbors, our communities, but in a globalized world, we have to think more broadly about what that means.
Unemployment among young people is I think at a 60-year high right now. What advice do you give to these young people as far as breaking into the workforce goes?
I think one of the challenges at the moment is not only is youth unemployment at a 60-year high, and given that we've only been monitoring youth unemployment in our country for about 60 years, it means it's at an all-time high. But long-term youth unemployment is also the highest that it's ever been. And the labor force participation rate among millennials in the United States is now about 54%. So that means that of people who either want to be in school or want to be working full-time, only 54% have been able to find opportunities to enable them to do that, which is deeply troubling. So I think, one of the reasons I say that is we need more creative ways to really diagnose what our unemployment challenge is, to be focused on sort of what the scope and the size of the challenge is, and then focused on what really the solutions are. It's something that we talked about in our panel this morning, sort of scaling what works, and something that my mom talked about in her remarks earlier today. We do know a lot about kind of what can work to enfranchise young people into the economy. And it doesn't always require, it often doesn't even require going to a 4 or 2-year institution, but it does require real targeted skills training and ensuring that that skills training is matched to a job at the end. Because one of the real conundrums that we've confronted in the last few years is that there have been lots of skills training programs that have been rolled out, but there hasn't been a job that they've been specifically targeting. So ensuring that we focus on what works, scale what works, and that there is a real job at the end of that kind of continuum, I think, is hugely important.
We're here at Arizona State, and they have, because of the way they're organized, they have many campuses, but they now have 85,000 undergraduates under this. Huh?
Students, undergraduates.
I mean, 85,000 students, graduates and non. The president told me yesterday that nobody pays any tuition if their family income is under $60,000, and nobody pays anything if their family income is below the poverty line, but they do have to work. And unlike many universities traditionally, which required students to work, in the cafeteria or in some other more menial job, a lot of these students get to work in the laboratories and support the research projects and support other things that actually add to their training and their employability, so that they're more creative about creating, how this work is done. I think that we're going to have to do a lot more of that. I think that I flew over here last night when we landed, and I saw lots of solar panels, but they weren't on every flat roof building. I saw more than half the roofs were painted white, which alone can cut your air conditioning bill in the summer by 20%. But a lot of them weren't. We flew over one building that had 5 separate offices, and there were 3 stripes. So 3 of them had painted the roof, 2 of them hadn't. There's a lot out there that could be done which would generate net wealth to the society and create employment to people. Those are just sort of super simple examples. And I think we're going to have to be much more creative and then make sure investment follows employment opportunities that are good for the society as a whole. Money tends to follow quicker payoff, which is why trading pays more than investment in finance today. And your generation is going to have to try to realign investment flows with real economic opportunities, so more of you are going to have something to do when you get up in the morning.
And that sorry, Dad. That then leads back to the conversation that my father and Sri were having on stage last night about the importance of STEM. One of the sort of series of statistics that I'm obsessed with, because it sort of admittedly follows major events in my life, was that in 1987, when Commodore was my big gift from Santa Claus, so thank you, Santa Claus, for my Commodore computer, women comprised about 37% of computer science graduates in the United States. When I graduated from Stanford in 2001, women comprised 21% of computer science graduates. And in 2012, women comprised just 16% of computer science graduates in the US. So this is an area that is fundamentally about the future, where women have been losing ground even as opportunities have expanded.
We need more lady nerds, is what you're saying.
We do.
Absolutely.
We absolutely need more lady nerds. We know that if we close the gender gap in STEM, we'd have literally hundreds of thousands of more jobs in our country, and jobs that companies are looking to fill. So as we think about longer term strategies, to my father's point, a lot of it really is about ensuring that every girl thinks that being an astronaut or an engineer or a computer scientist is not only a valid dream, but an achievable dream, and that we help her achieve that dream because we'll all be better off for it.
We are going to take some questions from the audience now. And I believe we have some students lined up who want to ask questions. We have microphones for you to ask those questions at. And where is our first questioner? There he is. Hello, what's your name?
David Kim.
And where do you go to school?
ASU.
There you go.
I have a question for President Bill Clinton. Which current world leader has caught your attention for their positive contributions to their country?
To their country?
Country, please.
Well, I could give you lots of examples. I think, first of all, I give Aung San Suu Kyi a lot of credit for her work in opening Myanmar, which Hillary helped to pioneer as Secretary of State, and they're good friends. And I think she's given a very important country a chance. They have a lot of problems. They still have all that Muslim-Buddhist violence on the border area with Rohingya they need to resolve, but I give her a lot of credit. I think Angela Merkel deserves a lot of credit in Germany. The Germans have the highest percentage of their workforce in manufacturing of any wealthy country, and the highest percent of their GDP tied to exports. And they've done a better job than we have with unemployment, partly because their unemployment payment system triggers before you're unemployed. That is, they help people work for small and medium-sized companies by moving in and paying a portion of the unemployment to keep somebody working, so you don't just let everybody go and then have to spend all the money to hire new people and train them again. Those are just a couple of examples. If you look at, I give the Rwandans a lot of credit for reorganizing their healthcare system, something I'm working with them on, and giving every rural family a milk cow, which in 1 year moved almost 700,000 people out of poverty in a country with a population of under 11 million. So I think you can look around the world on every continent and find people that are doing things that are truly remarkable. I think the Chinese president deserves a lot of credit for changing the one-child policy and for trying to increase internal consumption in China instead of just relying on exports in the future, which is an unsustainable policy. We'll see if it works. But there's a lot of exciting things going on in the world today that are positive, not just negative things.
What's your name? Where are you from?
Hi, my name is Ariel Reyes. I'm from the Claremont Graduate University. And I have a question for whoever wants to answer it, I guess. What can we as commitment makers do to ensure the success of our commitments?
I'll handle this. Well, maybe I'll pass this off to one of you.
Jimmy, please.
No, I think I'm definitely going to pass this off to one of you.
Well, I think we would all hope that kind of your commitment as it is fashioned now will set you up for success, that you do have a business plan for translating your idea into action. And I hope that this weekend has really helped you think about what partners would help you advance your work and what partners wouldn't help you advance your work. Kind of when you need to leverage off of something that someone else has already done and when you do need to kind of figure out something for yourself. When funding can help solve a challenge that you're confronting and when funding is not necessarily the solution. And we certainly hope that you will continue to ask for our help, guidance, and feedback. And so that this is not sort of the end of our relationship with each one of you, but only another step in that relationship. Because certainly we have a continued vested interest in your ongoing success. So if you haven't kind of learned whatever it is you need to learn to overcome whatever hurdle or bump along the road that you might confront, please continue to ask for our help, our feedback, our guidance, and whatever mentorship we can provide you.
When she says our help, I'm not included in that, so
I'll take note
let
of
me
that.
just
don't
say,
ask me for anything.
as you sit down, I want to say one of the things that is different about what we're trying to do through this CGI networking from the way politics was. I was in politics for a long time. I can tell you, we largely debated two questions, assuming there was no great foreign crisis. What are you going to do and how much money are you going to spend on it? What we largely debate here is whatever it is you propose to do and whatever it costs, how do you propose to do it so you can turn your good intentions into real changes? A greater focus on the how question will be more likely to attract the money. And in this case, thanks to all the universities that have given us chunks of money to help young people put their commitments into action, it's factually true here. But I predict to all of you that for the rest of your lives, the how question will become increasingly more important. I didn't say this to Mr. Kim, who asked the first question, but I'm guessing he is of Korean heritage. Is that correct?
He's saying yes.
South Korea has the world's highest broadband download speeds. And on average, they're 4 times the average speeds in America. Now we're catching up, thanks largely to Google and other private sector partners developing rapid download centers. But I just ask you to keep thinking about that. You ask a good question, but these how questions are going to dominate your life. It's going to, if you get 90% of the people concerned about climate change, if they can't imagine how to do it in a way that will generate employment, generate opportunity, not shut down economic activity in a given area, things still won't happen. We could put 100 million, 200 million, 500 million photovoltaic cells like you see up at Arizona State University all over Africa, and we can make the Caribbean energy independent tomorrow, but nobody's figured out how to do it. That's going to be the question that dominates the next 10 to 20 years of your life.
And I would also just add to the answers that we've already given that I hope you will stay in touch with each other. I mean, that is something that you now have as at least an option because you are already connected to one another. And so I hope that you will continue to share your ideas, your successes, but also your challenges, and kind of look to one another to help you solve them, and to remember that we are also always here. So thank you.
Yes, we have a question right here. What's your name?
Hi, my name is Sarah Takola. I'm from the University of Washington. I had a question about, so free trade acts hurt developed countries. The best example of this is when the American corn flooded the Mexican market, many Mexican farmers lost their jobs. So now with the Trans-Pacific Partnership Act set to propose, it will really hurt a lot of developed countries, a lot of Southeast Asian countries. With the patent laws increased, they're going to not have access to the generic medicine anymore. So I'm wondering, do you still support free trade acts like NAFTA and now the supersized version of that, the Trans-Pacific Partnership?
I believe, yeah. Let me just say, the general answer is yes, I do. If I had to write it again, I know a lot more about what's wrong with it now. That is, we've done nearly 200 environmental projects now under the fund set up when NAFTA passed. But I think now all trade agreements should have high labor standards, high environmental standards, and no supranational policy-making group like the one set up under NAFTA should be able to invalidate any country's environmental or public health laws or labor standard laws, so that you don't make it a race to the bottom, you make it a race to the top. If you do that, I think still trade can, on balance, be a big plus. And, you know, I'll give you an example. Mexico, it's interesting here in Arizona because there have been all these, you know, immigration arguments here. In 2 of the years in this decade, 2 of the last 4 years, there has been no net in-migration from Mexico to the United States. And Mexico and Brazil were 2 of the only big economies in the world in the previous decade that had a decrease in income inequality because they were able to build their own economies. I think our trading relations and what Brazil did with us and with Europe and with China had something to do with that. But I think that too many of these trade deals also had the effect of allowing outside economic interests to undermine the local public interest And I think the way to fix that is to say that you can't have secret, non-public, multinational decision-making bodies undermining protections that elected officials in a given country gave for the public health or for the environment.
But I want to add something. I agree with what Bill just said, but you specifically mentioned corn farmers. And one of the real challenges in any trade agreement is who wins and who loses. Now, take Mexico in the education arena. I think it's right that in the last year or two, if you compare the number of engineering graduates in Mexico to the engineering graduates in the United States, which is a much bigger country, the engineering graduates in Mexico are about 75,000, in the United States about 90,000. So there's work for engineers, but there may be less work for corn farmers. So one of the answers, and this goes back to the how question, one of the answers when you think about trade, because in general, trade is a more effective way of allocating resources and goods and services as long as it is done with a clear eye about how you help people who might be adversely affected. And if you look at trade today, there's no doubt that we have cities in our country that lost a lot of jobs to Mexico. You know, manufacturers are actually now bringing manufacturing back from China because wages are rising in China. They're putting it on the border between the United States and Mexico. So there's always pluses and minuses. And one of the big issues that Bill alluded to and Chelsea talked about is how do we have enough jobs with rising incomes in a globalized world? Because we're not going to turn the clock back. So even if we didn't have free trade agreements, you would still have winners and losers. So how do we do a better job with the agreements we enter into, and how do we do a better job in trying to create more economic push from the bottom up so that if a farmer loses his job in the cornfields in Mexico, or a manufacturing worker loses a job to Mexico in Ohio, what happens to them and their families? So this is a complicated issue. You're right to raise it, and you're right to raise red flags about it, and I think we have learned a lot about what works and what doesn't work, and the generic drug issue you mentioned is something that is very important and critical to me, because I voted against the Central American Free Trade Agreement, so-called CAFTA, when I was in the Senate, in large measure because of that, because it was going to make it impossible for those countries in Central America to be able to get drugs for HIV/AIDS or anything else at an affordable price. I don't want to do anything that undermines the genius of the American pharmaceutical companies. They create a lot of the drugs that we all in the end have to rely on, but there's got to be a more equitable way to distribute them so they're affordable, so that people can get access to them. So these are some of the tough questions that we have to ask the how about.
Yes, what is your name?
Good evening, my name is Vrinda Agarwal and I'm from the University of California, Berkeley.
Good evening.
My question is for Ms. Hillary Clinton, who inspired me to study political science. Yesterday, Manal was on this stage talking about Saudi Arabia, and somebody asked her, if you don't represent women in politics in Saudi Arabia, who will? My question today is, there is still so much inequality for women in America. As we've seen on this stage, you've been talking about STEM education and how only 16% of computer science graduates in this country are women. Ms. Clinton, if you don't represent women in politics in America as future president, who will?
Well, that's a good, it's a very good question. And further, well, it looks like you have some support here. And also to add to that, when you do run for president, will you reuse the old Clinton campaign lawn signs?
Do you still have yours, Jimmy?
Probably do, yes. Faded in the Arizona sun.
Well, you know, I must say that you have certainly done your education proud. That was very well asked and very well presented. And I appreciate the sentiment. Yeah. Look, I am very much concerned about the direction of our country, and it's not just who runs for office, but what they do when they get there, and how we bring people together, and particularly empower young people so that we can tackle some of these hard decisions we've just been talking about. So
she wants an answer.
Well, I'm getting to it. So let me say this: that give me your name and number.
I will proudly run your campaign.
I like your attitude, your confidence. Thank you. And no, I'm obviously thinking about all kinds of decisions. And well, you know,
do you think you and the president will have another child? Any more children?
Well, no, but I wouldn't mind.
Let's really get into it.
I wouldn't mind one of those grandchildren that I hear so much about. But you know,
No
pressure.
But you know,
unapologetic pressure in public and private.
But Jimmy, you know, I have been waiting. I've been waiting for more than an hour now. I've been waiting for more than an hour for Matt Damon to come out.
We ran out of time for him, unfortunately. I love, though, that when pressed with the question that everybody, of course, asks you all the time, you threw your daughter right under the bus with the baby thing.
Did you notice that? It's better than the time when I was with my mom in upstate New York when she was running for Senate in 2000, and we were at sort of the largest Polish American festival in the United States every year, and we were standing on stage, and the captain of the national Polish polka dance team came up to my mother and said, you know, Mrs. Clinton, would you do me the honor? And she said, my daughter would love to. Yep, that happened. I would like to give a different answer quickly, although clearly I'll support my mom in whatever she chooses to do. I really hoped that Manal last night would say, I would love to run for office in Saudi Arabia one day. And we have talked about all the different ways in which we can participate and in which so many of us already do participate in our countries. But I hope that at least some of you, if not all of you, will consider running for office, that you will consider the question that was just asked to each one of you, because ultimately government sets the conditions for what the private sector and those of us in the non-governmental sectors can do. Not the limits of our imagination, but the limits of what we can necessarily achieve. So I hope that I will be voting for some of you in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you. Should you wind up back in the White House, will Chelsea get her old room back, or will you convert that into a home gym?
You're throwing me under the bus now, too? Like, what is this?
This is what parents do. It's what my parents did to my bedroom. I'm staying with them here in Arizona. Well, I just want to say thank you. Thanks to all of you. I am relying on you guys to get us through the future, because I am going to be of no help whatsoever. And we got some great questions, and I'm so impressed by this. When I was a student, I came to the Gamage Auditorium, and the extent of my political conviction was I think I came here to see Jerry Seinfeld and Bill Maher do stand-up comedy. So to have so many smart people here at my alma mater makes me feel very proud. And I hope you do all run for office, because you seem very, very smart. And we thank you all for coming and participating in CGI U. Keep doing it. Keep in touch with each other. I think that's probably one of the most important things. You get to be in a group with some very, very smart people your age, and some of you will build friendships and bonds that will last for the rest of your lives. And that's probably the most important thing of all of this stuff. So thank you to the Clinton family. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak to you. Thanks to all of you for coming. Thanks to Arizona State University. Good night, everybody.
Ladies and gentlemen, the closing plenary session has now concluded. Please enjoy the CGI U exchange and dinner in the Sun Devil Fitness Complex 3-Bay Gym this evening. Please remember to join us tomorrow morning for the CGI U Day of Action with Phoenix Renews. Buses will depart at 8 a.m. and you must have your CGI U credential to board the bus. All participants must wear closed-toe shoes. For more information about the event and bus pickup locations, please check the mobile app or the CGI U website. Thank you.
Clap along if you feel like that's what you want.